sense of how it was, where you had the physician, the patient, and your insurance company. That's the way we were trying to operate. And it had its flaws. But as a result, here is a graphical representation now of how the system now works. This is now the Obamacare and the interrelationship between agencies, departments, and entities of how you deal with it. And so when you try to correct one part, you affect another part. It's very complicated. But we can't go back to the old way. I don't want to go back to the old way. That failed. It hurt people, and we're not going to go back. But we got to find another way that is not as complicated as that, not as expensive as that. I've met with nursing homes that are laying off people. Jobs are being lost because they can't afford to pay the cost of health care for their employees. The landlord. I don't think that was the overall objective that we wanted to accomplish with it. So I'm just trying to say that when people talk about jobs, what we're talking about are affecting all of these things because that's how you get the jobs. Okay? So with that, I think I've covered an awful lot of. I've got some just talking with you. There were 87, because many of you I haven't seen since the campaign or the election back in November. There were 87 freshmen Republican and 9 freshmen Democrats that were elected. So literally 25% of Congress is fresh, new ideas. Some of us more experienced than others, but it's an interesting group, and sometimes we get together, we interact with each other, we try to talk about where we want to take it, what we're bringing, what issues we want to bring, what we want to work on, and so we're trying to have some dialogue with everyone. But I think that I'll close on this because I think you're seeing it's taken 7 months, but I think you're seeing a change in the discussion, the culture of Washington. 7 months ago, the president said in his speeches that he was calling for increase because there's some people in Washington believe that more government spending will create jobs. It probably does in the government sector, but we're trying to create them in the private sector. But so he called for $6 trillion more in spending and $7 trillion more into higher taxes. Now fast forward 8 months later to what the debate is now sounding like in Washington, and you see it's a lot different. Now we're not talking about more taxes, more spending. We're trying to find out how we're going to cut the budget, how we're going to reduce spending. And for the first time in 15 years, this is huge for me, first time in 15 years, we're going to have a vote on a balanced budget. And I think that's where we want to be. At least I think that's where I want to allow the American public to have a voice in that. If they vote it down, so be it, okay? But I think it's good to give them the chance to speak up. If they don't want it, fine. We've given it to them. But for 15 years, they haven't. I don't think the country's ever been given that opportunity. But we're going to work on it. So our cut, cap, and balance was our first effort. We passed out of the House, sent it over to the Senate, and the Senate killed it because they said they didn't like cut cap. So now, this fall, we're getting them 2 more votes. And they're going to have votes that's just a clean up or down vote of whether or not you want a balanced budget amendment to go to the American people for approval, one way or the other. So it's going to be interesting because no one's going to be able to argue that, well, we didn't like that other aspect of it. No, this all has to do with just a balanced budget, where we're going to be with it. So let's, is there anything else that we would want to touch on before the Q&A?
We have a class.
I'm sorry? Yeah, thank you for that. We've had, it may come up in the questions perhaps on this, but people in their good faith, they mean very well, and sometimes they let us the editor or something, and we hear the discussion. And it's been frequently enough that we ask people, we've asked the CBO to give us more data. And this guy, I wish I could take credit for this chart, but I can't. It was done by a guy out in Arizona, another congressman out there, and it was an interesting chart that they were talking about. Well, we got to close this loophole in these corporate jets. Okay? Well, in the big scheme of things, on a 24-hour clock, if you put the amount we spend every day on our debt, what would be the cost savings if we change that loophole about corporate jets? 15 seconds in a 24-hour clock. It's not where the fight is. Don't chase that rabbit. You're going down the wrong path. Then we got another one here. Then the other people, and I can understand there's a lot of class warfare. And that's not, you know, that doesn't help our society, it doesn't help our discussion. But people will talk about, we've got to tax the rich, we've got to get the Bush tax cuts. I hear that, I understand, I'll listen to you. But if you did away with all the Bush tax cuts, you save 28 minutes on a 24-hour clock. There's the other 23 and a half hours of spending. It's not that, but that just puts it in context. What do we have? Then I'll be with you on the oil companies. If we want to eliminate the subsidies for our oil companies, we can do the whole thing. Get rid of all the subsidies of our oil. We save 2.2 minutes. It's not where the fight is. The fight's on some big issues. They're much bigger. If you put them all together, here's one that's Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, the Bush tax cuts. If we did all of that, we'd have 3 hours out of a 24-hour clock. That's still not where it is. It's all the other spending. It's all the other spending. One of the big things, I know I'm off game here again a little bit on it, is a bit about Medicare and the fraud. And I know everyone wants to go to fraud, and they said how that's where everyone wants to cut. Obama will say that oftentimes. That's what he wants to cut, is cut fraud. It's not going to be easy. Because if you do it, they would have done it long before now. But I'll just say one of the things because I come from the private sector, that I find always interesting is Medicare works on a different system. They're structurally functioning around a thing what we jokingly call in Washington is pay and chase. Any physician, any provider just sends in the right code number to the Medicare program, they'll get paid. Then after a period of time, the auditors will go back and they'll say, we got to go check on that one, confirm whether or not it was appropriate. Sometimes that doctor is nowhere to be found, the patient's nowhere to be found. They try to collect the money and they can't because it was fraudulent. I don't understand that system, pay and chase. I've been in the construction industry now for close to 45 years. We make sure that we verify that the work is done, satisfactory, and representing the owner. We sign off on it, and a check then is cut. I think we ought to be looking at that kind of system to make sure that people got what they were supposed to be receiving. The doctors are indeed they're not a post office box, they're not a fictitious name. So those are some of the things that represents. We found in the debate it was anywhere, because they really don't know the exact amount, anywhere between $50 and $100 billion every year is in wage fraud and abuse. So when we're addressing Medicare, one of the things we've really got to firm up is a structural change. Do we keep doing it, this pay and chase, or do we reverse it a little bit so that we have more verification? So let me just end on that, okay? And let's see what questions. Are there anything else that you think that overall that we've missed? Some things come up with questions. We okay?